So he's a young guy with a lot of upside.
I love that doo-doo line. That boy's got talent.
So we always want to get ahead of these things, right? We don't know what he will be, but you know what somebody like Nick Batum is going to be, right? We've seen that movie.
We've seen this before.
We haven't seen this movie. This is unreleased. This is a fresh mixtape. Here are the top 5 waiver wire targets you need to take a look at for fantasy basketball. The first guy I want to talk about is someone that got a lot of hype early, right? He's a really young guy who had a couple of big games. He's even in the conversation with some of those young legends like LeBron James. He had some stats that were similar to LeBron James. I'm talking about from the Memphis Grizzlies, Gigi Jackson, aka Gregory Jackson, right? So if you look up Gigi Jackson in your free agency pool, he will likely be available. If he's not, you're playing with some really good players. But currently, he is just rostered in 3.1% of ESPN leagues. He's just rostered in 18% of Yahoo leagues. He is literally the youngest player in the NBA right now. The youngest player. Right? You know what he will be. But you know what somebody like Nick Batum is going to be, right? We've seen that movie. We haven't seen this movie. This is unreleased. This is a fresh mixtape. You're winning. You are sitting good in the standings. You appear to be heading towards a playoff berth, or you've already clinched a playoff berth. Then he's the kind of player that you let him just cook and simmer slow for the next couple of weeks to see if something is there. Because as this season winds down for the Memphis Grizzlies, rest assured that they're going to try to see what they have in this young man. They're not fighting for a playoff push. They're really trying to assess the talent that they have and get ready for next year when Ja comes back healthy, Bane is healthy. You know, I don't even know what it's going to look like when Bane returns. You know, they might not want to risk any serious injury, so we'll see what happens there. But I would definitely recommend grabbing Gigi Jackson. Next up is a player that I don't believe in my long-legged life ever on this show. In all of the years, this is our third season, right? So we've been doing this show for 3 years. And if you've been a part of the community for any amount of time, thank you. But especially my OG folks who've been down since the Game Pick podcast days, we're super grateful for you. But I don't think I've ever mentioned this man as a potential waiver wire target. But today, we about to take the top off. Boobies is out. Hair blowing in the wind. Convertible status. Let's get it. I'm talking about Marvin Bagley Jr. What? Did they say Marvin Bagley Jr.? Yes, I said Marvin Bagley Jr. So check it out. Marvin Bagley Jr. is just rostered in 15.9% of ESPN leagues, but he's rostered in a whopping 57% on Yahoo. That means something, folks. We got to pay attention to that. We have to pay attention. So Dan Gafford is banged up, and with Dan Gafford banged up, let me just take it back a little bit. So he recently joined the Washington Wizards in a trade, right? So this is his third destination. He was drafted by the Kings, ended up moving to Detroit. Now he moved over to Washington. So new scenery, young player, still a lot of runway ahead for him in his career. And Dan Gafford being injured is kind of like the perfect storm to see what we can get out of Marvin Bagley Jr. He's also auditioning for the Washington coaching staff and ownership, right? So it's not just like a fantasy thing. This is just like a real life thing. This young man is trying to make sure, like he was a lottery pick, you know what I'm saying? And he just hasn't really struck gold yet. And he's having a really strong start with Gafford out. And as long as Gafford is out, he will hold some value. Right now, he's the only healthy center in Washington. So pay attention to Gafford news. to see what happens. But when Gafford gets healthy, do not draft Bagley because Bagley can also play the 4. And we don't know what they're going to do over in Washington while they're throwing all of that spaghetti up against the wall. Let me get a quick sip of this water. Again, trying to push through, y'all. Okay. Next up, we got Herb Jones. And I know Herb Jones has been stinking up the joint from the New Orleans Pelicans. He had a really hot start, was killing it, and he has just been plummeting. So people are like, hey, Robin, why in the heck would you tell me to grab Herb Jones if he been stinking up the joint? I'll tell you why. Recently, it was reported by Matt Moore from the Action Network that the Pels are considering moving Herb Jones. The trade deadline is right around the corner, y'all. So some of these moves, we have to start making them speculating what could happen, but also just getting ahead of things that we believe, might transpire in this frenzy that's about to happen with the trade deadline. So for me, that's the move there. He does have value if he's with the Pels. So I would just, take advantage of that low value right now, which is decent. It's not like he's totally stinking up the joint. He has some good games and some bad games. He's currently rostered in 26.6% of ESPN leagues and 57% of Yahoo leagues, right? So people see some value in him. I would just grab him now as we approach that trade deadline. But if he gives you too many stinkers and you're not in a position to stomach that, then it's okay to drop him. But I think this would be a nice kind of a thinking forward, thinking ahead ad for your roster. Next up, Jabari Walker. Jabari Walker is just rostered in 4.3% of ESPN leagues. He's only rostered in 29% of Yahoo leagues. Listen, with what they're trying to do over there is really figure out what they have, right? They got a bunch of injuries. It's really an opportunity for a player like Walker to kind of, stake his claim to some minutes and to some value in the short term. So I would just give him an ad, see how it goes. Give me a second. I'll get some more water. Next up from the Toronto Raptors, Jontay Porter. Only rostered in 0.7% of ESPN leagues and 7% of Yahoo leagues. Definitely somebody that I would take a look at in deeper league formats, but I've even seen people add him and talk about him in 12-team formats. But if you're in a deeper league, 14, 16, 18, and he's available, that's definitely somebody I would be trying to snatch up right now. He is a bit of a long shot. And I would say just tracking his recent his minutes, the minutes that he's logging, that he needs more minutes, right? So it's like 18, 20. He's in that area, and I think he just needs more minutes. But it's worth noting that this past Monday, he did have his first start of the season. So I don't know if that's a sign of things to come, but it's definitely something that I'm going to keep an eye on. I've already picked him up in my 14-team league.